What's a story you've always wanted to share here but no one ever asked the right question? I was driving home from work on a really cold night. I was pulling up to a stoplight, 2 lanes, I'm a few cars behind. The light turns green and one if the first car's in the right lane isn't moving. It's end of day, everyone is cranky and honking and just maneuvers around him. As I'm passing by I see it's an older gentleman and he is just sitting there staring straight ahead, both hands on the wheel. It just didn't seem right, so I find a place to turn around and get behind him with my car. I walk up to the car and ask him if he is alright. Poor guy is basically in tears and says his car has stalled. At that point maybe 3 or 4 other people pull over and I tell them all what has happened. We all go into action. I put him in my warm car and then we all push us into an empty parking lot. I write a note on the window saying what happened and leave the old man's son's number he gave me, and mine just in case. I gave him a ride home. We got to talking and he was saying that he knew he shouldn't have gone out, but his sick wife just wanted ice cream and wanted to get it for her. Just such a lovely man that wanted to do something loving for his wife. When I was in junior high, I ate a banana for breakfast and there was no garbage can around, so I left the peel in my jacket pocket. No big deal, except I forgot about it, and then I forgot about my coat and it stayed in class over a 3-day weekend. When we came back the teacher said, "Hey, someone left their coat here, whose is it?" Now, I remembered what was in the pocket, probably all rotted and slimy now, so I stayed quiet. The teacher starts looking for some identifying information and reaches into the pocket. The look on his face. Poor guy. When I was in the 4th grade my teacher made all the students make a poster about conservation. Naturally, I went to the library, typed in conservation and picked a random topic to match the theme. That just so happened to be surface mining or strip mining. I worked on the poster for a couple of days and when I finished I thought, wow, I did a great job on this poster. I went downstairs to show my parents my awesome conservation poster about how surface mining was bad for the environment and how it needs to stop. Instead of praise, which was what I was expecting, I received silence from my mother and the most angry glare I have ever seen from my father. He blows up yelling about how surface mining isn't bad and how could I make a poster like that. Turns out my dad was a surface miner and I didn't know it. Yikes. I got in trouble for a poster contest at my school because I didn't understand how serious 911 was. I was 6 when 911 happened, and shortly after that, it was Fire Prevention Week and students were encouraged to submit a poster for it. Having just seen the craziness of the Twin Towers falling, I thought it was an insane accident and decided I bet there could have been some better fire prevention happening there. I drew a poster of the towers being hit by planes. But firefighters catching people jumping out of the buildings and random citizens passing buckets of water to pour on the towers, saying when you work together, you can prevent fires with every person's face drawn with a smile. Submitted the poster to my teacher, who got white in the face and immediately handed back the poster with a note to my parents saying, "You need to talk with your daughter about the seriousness of this event." My family lost it laughing at my ignorance and has never let me live it down, but I was just a 1st grader and had no clue that 911 was malicious until that poster contest. Oofta. One time my friend pulled a gun on me. I was going to his house for our weekly gaming session, and he left the front door unlocked as usual. I went down to meet him, and he was just sitting there in the dark with a pistol. He stood up and pointed it at me as I came down. And I said, "Is that really necessary?" Then he realized who I was, said no, it's not, and we got to socializing. I don't know who he was expecting, but no one showed up while we were hanging out, and we still keep in touch, so it ended up all right. I was pleasantly surprised at how well I handled it, though. I guess I can officially say I can keep my cool in that kind of situation. When I was a child, I used to think the bad guys in movies shot into their ears to commit suicide rather than the temple. I always thought it was badass and so I emptied the clip of my BB gun and shot myself in the ear. I cried for an hour and no one was home at the time. Thankfully my hearing wasn't permanently damaged. It astounds me that some kids live past the age of 10. I was driving down the highway with no other cars around at the time and the window on my driver's side door imploded, spraying my ear with glass. Pulled over and a perfect circle was missing out of the window. A passing car caused the rest of the glass to fall out before I got a picture. Sent me to the ER for a few stitches. No clue what happened. Maybe the lawnmower in the median kicked up a rock? This happened to me at a stop sign a few years ago. I turned my head to the right to look for cars, and there was a loud noise. I see a hole in my window and all the glass was cracked, and a moment later it all came crashing down. Sometimes I still find little pieces of glass when I clean the driver's seat. Maybe you had your laser vision activated by mistake? Coming out of the back of my head. I was 16 years old and on a trip to Spain with a professor and some classmates. We were at a popular cathedral and I saw this dude who looked exactly how I would picture Jesus. Of course I leaned to my friends and tell them about it. A few minutes go by and I forgot about him, but then he snuck up to me, whispers the "I heard the Jesus thing" and slips me a business card that just says Jesus on it. I work on tugboats and one day I saw a hiking boat floating upside down in the water. We had time to kill, so I grabbed the boat hook and started raising the boat out of the water. It was ridiculously heavy, but I thought to myself that it was just waterlogged. As the boat came out of the water I started seeing a sock, and then a bone. I dropped it back into the water, started thinking what did I just see? Ended up calling the Coast Guard and they asked us to hold on to it until they can get a boat out to us and retrieve the boot. Ended up having this lower leg boot on my boat for a good 30 minutes as if it were NBD. I have a pic somewhere. My grandfather has this mysterious scar on the top of his arm. He knew my grandmother growing up and she said he didn't have it when he went into the army but had it when he returned. I grew up bothering him, begging to know how he got the scar. The rest of the family liked to make up stories of what could have caused the scar. He got bit by a shark while surfing. He got into a bar fight and was stabbed. He was attacked by a bear, etc. About 10 years ago I was on him about it again, asking him to at least tell us in his will. He got incredibly upset and blurted out our husband unexpectedly came home and I didn't realize the glass sliding door was closed. I had a stalker during high school. She saw some pictures of me on social media and just decided that I am her new boyfriend, although I have never seen her in RL and we texted for like 2 days or so. She would skip school just to be in front of my school right as I finished class. One day she got my number. I still don't know how, and she would call me 24/7. I had to turn off my phone while at a class trip, just because it wouldn't stop ringing. The next morning I had approximately 100 missed calls. My classmates thought it was hilarious. When she found out my address, I had enough and called her. She cried like crazy and threatened to kill herself. However, she wasn't the brightest and sent me a video where she filmed herself sitting on her window frame and saying her life didn't make any sense without me. So she would now kill herself and jumped out of the window. First of all, she lived on the first floor. Therefore she jumped like 2 meters, 5 foot, and pretended to be dead. Second of all, I asked her how she could send the video if she is dead. She just claimed to be the emergency doctor. I just blocked her and didn't react to any contact. Even her friends were trying to contact me and said that we should get back together, despite not being in a relationship in the first place. I changed my number and blocked her on every social media site. I never heard of her again. When I lost my virginity, the moment I took my shirt off, the first thing she said was, "Damn, you need to hit the weights." One time when I was a kid we were having a school assembly and our class was presenting some artwork we made. It was my job to introduce the artwork, and all I had to do was say one sentence. I can't remember exactly what it was now, but something along the lines of, "This week our class drew pictures of insert book characters here." Apparently this was far too difficult for me, so when my teacher handed me the microphone, I froze and stared straight into the audience like a deer in headlights. Seeing I was struggling, my teacher leaned down next to me and asked me what are our pictures to try and prompt me to remember what I was supposed to say. But no, this wasn't enough for my dumbass apparently, because I thought it was my line and said, way too confidently, into the microphone, "WH our PCT years." And yes, I think about this when I can't sleep. I saw a squirrel in my backyard once. I knew that there was poison all over the yard and I wanted to save the squirrel so it wouldn't die of puking its guts out. so I chased it, and it was slower than I expected. It ran into the wood pile, so I slowly dismantled the wood pile until I could see the squirrel's back fur. I reached in and grabbed the squirrel. It started biting my gloved fingers, so I decided to drop it so that it would run away. I accidentally ended up throwing it 8 feet in the air, and when it landed it was a bit stunned, and it didn't run very fast. Eventually it just gave up, so I picked it up and it didn't bite me this time. I took it to the park across the street and released it, hoping that experience would be so scary it wouldn't want to go back to my yard. Oh man, I really don't want that squirrel to get poisoned. Better beat it to death. I have 2 kids, a son, at the time 2, and a daughter, at the time almost 3, so my daughter was in the middle of toilet training and it wasn't going super well. I'm sitting on my computer in the middle of an online game when my son comes to me and informs me that my daughter had pooed. About 30 seconds from the end of the game, so I tell him okay, I will deal with it in a second. He waits patiently, I finish my game and turn to look at him. He then proceeds to hold the shit out to me and says look, she pooed. My daughter was standing right behind him, so in complete shock I ask her if she pooed, to which she replies yup, and then I ask her if that's it. Also yup. Without thinking I grab it, open the back door and lob it full force. It hits the fence at Mach 10, but not before my Samoyed decides that it must be a game of fetch. In the ensuing dry heaving and shit-splosion my son has all of a sudden decides that it's yucky and proceeds to rub his hands down as much of our leather couch as he can reach. My wife walks in as my shit-handed son is destroying our couch, my dog is eating the crap shrapnel off the fence. I'm dry reaching at the unbelievable amount of shit under my fingernails and my daughter is hunched over screaming at me to wipe her. To this day I'm unsure as to why she trusts me to take care of them alone.